So I have repeatedly criticized people on the left, like socialists, for behaving with an ad hoc, post hoc epistemology. Anytime any evidence comes along that proves them wrong or would falsify one of their claims, they just ignore it or they wave their hands and come up with a reason as to why it doesn't apply. And it happens on the right too, but I think it's basically like a fundamental psychological component of the left. And I want to talk about cultural Marxism. Google is gaslighting you, and I think we can prove it by, if you go to Google and you type in cultural Marxism, the first hit that you'll get is for a left-wing website that gives you a straw man version of cultural Marxism. It is so ridiculous. It's basically saying that people like Jim Morrison of the Doors and the Beatles were all members of a government psychological operation meant to undermine the nuclear family and destroy America, and that homosexuality and feminism and all these different things are part of an international plot, some globalist leftist agenda to destroy us. And that version is probably not what's really going on. Now, there's another version of what cultural Marxism is that I think most people actually mean when they're talking about cultural Marxism. It's not the anti-Semitic version promoted by people like the Southern Poverty Law Center so that they can get donations. What most people mean when they say cultural Marxism is they're referring to a group of scholars from Germany who came up, I think, in the 1920s and 30s and were mostly publishing in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and who really got famous in the 60s. And you can go look them up. You can look them up on Wikipedia or whatever other source that you like. And some of them are still alive. I think the youngest guy in the group was Jürgen Habermas. I think he's still alive today. And then there were probably some other loosely associated people who hangers on who might still be alive. But almost all of them are dead because they were, getting pretty old even in the 1960s. So they're neo-Marxists. And why do you need to be a neo-Marxist? I already said it earlier. It's because Marxism, being one of these leftist doctrines, doesn't rely on evidence. It's super rational rather than super empirical. They don't really care what actually happens in the world. They just have a chain of reasoning, and if anything comes along that doesn't fit with their reasoning that they've worked out, they just write it off or add an addendum. So the problem with Marxism is that it basically used class for everything. There's the good guys and the bad guys. The good guys are the proletariat, the working class. The bad guys are the capitalists, the rich people. And it didn't work. It wasn't good enough. So by the time 1930s, 40s, and 50s, the cultural Marxists, the people in the Frankfurt School, which is who we're talking about, they kind of realized that they were never going to get anywhere in terms of class by itself. So they and their disciples started opening up the debate, opening up the people who were in the victim class to include sex, gender, race, and you can kind of tell that this was going on. If you go to Africana studies departments or Chicana studies departments, any of the feminist departments, of course, obviously the gender studies, any of these folks who've appeared in the last 20 or 30 years, you can go look at their syllabi and probably even go look at the faculty members and see who they studied under. And I'm almost positive that in the majority of cases, you're going to see that they come directly out of this tradition. And if they didn't come out of it themselves, they're probably teaching it to a large extent. And I, from my own personal experience, dealing with certain departments on a research university campus, I saw all this myself. So you can kind of see it whenever you argue with people on the left. If you present them with data or statistics or facts, they're not really interested in that, and you certainly can't persuade them. It's because this stuff is an article of faith to them. And it fits into the overall history of the ideas, specifically the cultural Marxism of the Frankfurt School, because they rejected logical positivism They were not interested in the Western tradition of rationalism and empiricism, as I understand it, and as you probably understand it, and which works really good. They weren't interested in that because they kind of viewed it as a white man's colonial enterprise that was destined to keep women and blacks and overseas non-Europeans down. So they had to do something different, and what they suggested was an endless culture of critique, argument, reasoning. Again, reasoning but not empiricism. And I think that if you were to go look at any of their works, you would notice two things. One, they're almost impenetrable. It's really difficult to understand anything they're saying. And you can go get this in their primary text, the books and articles they wrote, or just from looking at the Wikipedia entry for the school or for the people themselves. Their ideas are really hard to grasp because they're not very good ideas. You know, when someone comes at you with a really good idea, you hear it and you think, damn, I wish I had thought of that. You're never going to get that listening or reading to any of these guys. It's deliberately obtuse. It's deliberately opaque. And it's almost like anti-intellectual in that sense. It's mysterious. It's like Gnostic. You know, you sit there and you have to think about it and think about it until you've convinced yourself that you've gotten something profound. And all of this is really my attempt to grapple with the difficult nature of these ideas, because I really enjoy the empirical tradition. I enjoy taking an idea and thinking, how could we possibly test this? How could we find out if the idea is a good one or a bad one? Or does it produce any testable hypotheses? Basically just science. I like the science of ideas. And this stuff is anti-science in a big way. In a really big way. And it disturbs me because this is basically what's being used now to attack everything in Western culture. So it's kind of like a conspiracy theory, not in the sense that the Doors or the Beatles or somebody was part of a governmental psychological operation, but now it does appear that there's a huge concerted effort by plenty of people in the media and in government to pursue this kind of argumentation with these kind of goals. And just as a quick example, I was talking to a black person on Twitter who liked Black Lives Matter, and I couldn't get the point across to her that she's worried about a certain number of black men who were killed by white police officers when, at the same time, probably 10 to 20 to 100 times as many black men are being killed by black people in black communities. So you can't get that kind of stuff across to someone who's coming at it from the leftist position because they've already made their mind up. They don't care about the data. They don't care about the statistics. They don't care about the facts. They've just got a certain interpretation that came down, which is critique, critique, critique. And you can't really argue with them. You can argue with them, but you're not going to get anywhere. So this is my attempt to kind of talk through the issues that are going on with the cultural Marxist stuff, and kind of basically what the biggest problem we have right now is, how do we deal with these people, and how do we get our ideas across in an environment when these people have got all of the media basically on their side. Thanks. Please comment.